Welcome, adventurers. Are you drawn to chaos, to acts of bravery, maybe with just a touch of idiocy? How would you like to be rewarded rather than punished for that audacious behavior? If that sounds up your alley, then you want to be a swashbuckler. Welcome to Rebel Then King. Today, we are talking about the ultimate show-off in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the Swashbuckler. Swashbucklers are a dexterity-based martial class. They are trained in simple and martial weapons, though they do only have light armor proficiency. They have 10 hit points per level and are trained into a number of skills equal to 4 plus their intelligence modifier plus acrobatics. There are 5 subclasses which are called styles. You have the battle dancer, the braggart, the fencer, the gymnast, and the wit. So overall, they're a kind of surprisingly tough but agile martial class. They have a unique way of doing bold, audacious things, and they get rewarded for that with a system called Panache. Let's look at that now. For a swashbuckler, Panache is their special martial ability. It's a state, kind of like rage, that lets you add more damage. But before we talk about adding damage with Panache, let's talk about how you gain Panache. Swashbucklers can gain Panache in 3 different ways. They can tumble through an enemy square. They can take an action specific to their subclass, to their style. For example, as the braggart, you can demoralize. As the fencer, you can feint. And then third, you can do something that's awesome. Yeah, in the rulebook, it basically says, do something that your GM thinks is really cool and your GM can reward you with Panache. And this is fun. For example, I GM'd a short campaign and we had a swashbuckler character in that. There was one time the swashbuckler was up above, kind of on a bridge area, and there were enemies below. And that swashbuckler chose to take a long jump, jumping over the enemies. Now, this isn't a tumble through, though it is similar. And I sort of figured, well, it's very similar in kind of the flavor of what they're trying to do. And it's really fun. I mean, they jumped over the enemies' heads. So yeah, that was an example of something that I said, that was really cool. You had to take an action to do that. You had to nail that athletics check to make the jump. You gain Panache. And once you have Panache, you do more damage. The first thing that happens is you add 2 points of damage to each one of your strikes, as long as you are using an agile or finesse melee weapon or unarmed attack. Typically the rapier, let's be honest. You're using a rapier if you're playing as a swashbuckler. And this damage does scale up at later levels, so that's nice. The second way that you can add more damage is a little bit more complicated, but I really like it. It's using something called a confident finisher. Now, this is just 1 action, even though I always think it's 2 because so many martial abilities are 2 actions. It's only 1 action, and you make a strike. If this strike lands, you add 2d6 additional damage. The cool thing is, if the strike misses, you do half of 2d6 additional damage. So you'll still do some damage even on a miss. The downside is, once you use a confident finisher, you do lose Panache. Also, it has the finisher trait. A finisher trait means you can't take any more attack actions during that turn. And this is why you often see swashbuckler players using this confident finisher only at the end of a turn or towards the end of an encounter. It's kind of nice to have that static +2/+2 just from your regular Panache strikes. And then when you really need it, you need to finish off an enemy, then you turn to the confident finisher. But Panache actually does a few other things for you that aren't just damage. I know we always talk about damage when talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, DPS, it's like all that matters. But there are other parts about Panache to talk about. First of all, while you have Panache, you have a 5-foot bonus to your speeds. You also have a +1 bonus to tumble through, as well as a +1 bonus to the action that is tied to your style. So using those examples earlier, If you're a fencer, you will have a +1 bonus to feint. So this is really cool. It kind of presents this picture of like just a heightened state of activity and movement in addition to the extra damage while you have Panache. So you need Panache, but you lose Panache with your Confident Finisher. But Confident Finisher is awesome, so you want to use it. What do? Well, there are some pretty advanced, pretty cool gameplay techniques that can help you get around this problem. You can really unlock your swashbuckler gameplay by chaining together actions, reactions with the assistance of some feats. For example, if you're playing as a braggart who can gain Panache through Demoralize, this is what you can do. And I did steal this from the player in my campaign who's playing as a swashbuckler of this style. They did a really good job building their character. Anyway, you can gain Panache however you want, make some actions, some strikes, then use your Confident Finisher. If you drop that enemy, you get to use a reaction called Your Next. This allows you to intimidate someone on the battlefield after you kill an enemy. Well, if that intimidate check works, you will gain Panache again. And in theory, you can just kind of keep repeating this. You'll get to use your Confident Finisher like on every turn. This is just one example. There are other examples you can find in the other styles. So do consider this because you can really, really be a terror on the battlefield if you play it correctly. And I say if you do it correctly, if you build it correctly, because it can be difficult to build and play as a swashbuckler. Starting with the build phase, swashbucklers are very multiple attribute dependent. You need that dexterity for your attack rolls and for your defenses. You'll want some strength because you do want to add some static damage in addition to Panache damage to your strikes. And then depending on your style, you really will need a third attribute. For example, if you are playing as the Wit, well, you need to bon mot successfully, or you can bon mot successfully for your Panache. This means you need to invest in Charisma. That's 3 ability scores that you really need to invest in. Though I will say I do like that Dexterity is their key ability score and not Strength. It does play better into the flavor of the class. It does lead to acrobatics rather than athletics checks, which I think is more appropriate for this class. So maybe it's not the easiest to build, but I do think it's probably the best that it can be in order to fit the desired flavor. And once you've built a pretty successful, at least on paper, swashbuckler, finding success on the battlefield still isn't guaranteed. And that's because without Panache and successful strikes, well, a swashbuckler is not really doing much. And gaining Panache does require a skill check. And then attacking requires rolling dice as well. So your dice kind of need to be consistently back-to-back hot. And I have seen this frustrate swashbuckler players quite a lot. In the Find the Path Presents actual play of Hell's Rebels, they have a character who started as a swashbuckler, and after, 5 or 6 episodes, they actually changed to a fighter. The dice are just so much more forgiving as a lot of other character classes in the system. In my Outlaws of Alkenstar campaign, we have a braggart swashbuckler who uses intimidation to demoralize for Panache. Well, we keep fighting constructs. They are immune to mental effects. This means that our character, who is out there to demoralize, simply can't. All in all, a swashbuckler kind of relies on the perfect conditions and the perfect dice rolls in order to be effective. But when you do have success as a swashbuckler, it's often really, really rewarding. Yes, you might have a few encounters where you feel pretty frustrated, pretty helpless. But then you land a critical hit with your Confident Finisher, and oh my. Let's take a look at that math using a rapier, because again, as a swashbuckler, of course you're using a rapier. You essentially are doing 3d6, that's d6 from your weapon, plus the 2d6 from Confident Finisher, and then let's say you have a character with +3 strength for maximum damage. So that is 3d6 plus 3 doubled for the critical hit, And then the Rapier has that deadly D8 trait, so you add a D8 to it. That's an average of 31.5 points of damage on that hit at level 1. That's going to kill almost anything you could ever imagine fighting at that level. And again, sort of back to that chained reaction kind of advanced gameplay, when that works, when you confident finisher, you're next, confident finisher, you're next, you are unstoppable and it feels awesome. It's a literally hit and miss class, but I think that actually goes well with the flavor of the class. I mean, you are bold, daring, and you do kind of stupid things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Well, there you have it, the chaotic ups and downs of the Swashbuckler. Again, I like the ups and downs. I think it fits the flavor of the class. I also think, it makes gameplay a little bit more fun. If you're just always consistently good fighter, it can get a little bit boring. Your back-to-back dice rolls don't matter quite as much. I like the class, though I've never seen a Swashbuckler player not get severely frustrated, never not double negative. You get what I'm saying. It's always a little bit frustrating. For those reasons, I'm going to have to give it just 6 out of 10 swashbuckles, or buckled swashes. I don't actually know what swashbuckler means. But what do you think? Have you seen a swashbuckler who is consistently good all the time? If so, what did that build look like? How did they handle the multiple attribute dependency? If you've got some insight, let me know in the comments. Until then, just keep doing those stupid, reckless, and frankly dangerous things because, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Keep making your GM say, you want to do what? I guess. Fine, give me an athletics check. Oh my god, I can't believe that worked. Yeah, fine. You've got Panache.